I have a lot of thoughts and feelings and emotions that I just want to pour forth upon your unsuspecting little heads, but I feel like if I just let that happen, then things might come out that sound meaner than I intend. Why? I guess the best way to start this out is by being as fair as I can possibly be. Adapting a book into a film format, I can only imagine, is a very difficult transition. It is a tough job for the writers, the director, the producer, the casting director, the actors. So I don't want you to have it in your head that I think this is an easy task. And there's not really one clear, precise way to go about it, no matter what you think. You can sit there and say, why didn't they just follow the book word for word? But that's not really how it works, and typically, if you tried to do that, I'm sure that books would translate into film just in a very boring, tedious way that the average moviegoer would not generally accept and or like. So I think that's important that I put that out there. I don't think it's easy, but I do think you can make catastrophic mistakes along the way. So, the Scorch Trials. Alright, so maybe I should also say that the Scorch Trials is my least favorite book in the entire Maze Runner series. I mean, there's only 3, but it's a very clear choice for the least favorite book. And you will find, if you talk to more people, that the Scorch Trials is also their least favorite book. So there's a lot of reasons for this. It's not necessarily that the Scorch Trials is a bad book, or at least I don't think so. I actually think it's a very well written, very interesting book. It's just compared to the Maze Runner, especially because you read the Maze Runner and then you go into the Scorch Trials, it is an absolutely jarring change of pace. That is to say, the Maze Runner is just full of mystery and all this enigmatic violence and action, and there's this question of who is wicked, why are we on this little isolated glade, what is the maze for? There's all this action, the running, the monsters, and then all of a sudden you hit a brick wall. And that brick wall is the Scorch Trials. And you are all of a sudden moving at the speed of molasses, and everything is frustrating. So if it's been a long time since you've read the Scorch Trials, or maybe if you've never read the Scorch Trials, I can kind of give you the rundown. So the movie did something a little bit different. Basically, they hop out of the tunnel and the scientists are sitting there waiting for them, and they're like, cool, commence phase 2, and that's the Scorch Trials, which is why it's called the Scorch Trials. I think somewhere along the line, maybe the makers of the film kind of forgot that. And they're like, you're ready for phase 2, we're gonna send you out to the Scorch. I'm definitely, minimizing everything that happens, but, for the most part, this is what happens. And then Thomas, poor sweet Thomas, just doesn't know who to trust, and for good reason. Nobody gives him a good reason to trust them, but expects him to trust them fully. Everybody he meets is an awful person with horrible, dubious intentions, to say the least. And anybody who seems trustworthy ends up not being very trustworthy, and it's just a very frustrating story. When you get into the Scorch Trials, I think you expect to get to where you were in the Maze Runner action and adventure-wise, but taken up a few notches, you're ready for this. But what ends up happening is it's taken down quite a few notches, and instead the Scorch Trials just adds a billion other questions. None of your questions are answered. None of them. You get into the Scorch Trials novel, none of your questions from the Maze Runner are answered. You do, however, get a billion more questions piled on your poor, confused, fragile, tired shoulders by the end of it all. So this is why people generally, everybody has their reasons, but generally don't like the Scorch Trials. It's very confusing, it feels very long, everybody's betraying everybody. It's just, and it's so different from the Maze Runner. I think there was a part of all of us that expected it to be like the Maze Runner, especially because it's the Scorch Trials. It's kind of supposed to be another trial that the gang is going through. And there are some really cool twists and turns, but overall none of your questions are answered, and by the time you come out of the Scorch Trials, you feel like you are more lost than ever. I put a lot of thought into this. So anybody who's read this series knows that if you've read The Death Tier, Scorch Trials suddenly makes a lot more sense. In fact, it actually makes the book better. Maybe this is just me, but the first time I read The Scorch Trial, I really liked it, but I was just like, what? Okay, so what? You know, I did like it, and I did like the book. I expected there would be more, and there was. See, there's a lot of things at play here. I'm trying to formulate my thoughts properly because I have so much to say. But basically, you get to the Death Cure, and you finish the Death Cure, and suddenly the Scorch Trials, the Maze Runner, makes a heck of a lot more sense. The catch is, the answers you get aren't happy ending, everything's okay answers. This is a very frustrating book series through, and very, very sad, because there's no perfect, happy, everything is okay ending. It's not Dashner's style, and it's actually one of the reasons why I think this is one of the best sci-fi young adult fiction series ever, right now. Out. Just there. Really well done. Very sad, very frustrating, but it's just cool. It's cool that he didn't tie everything up in a pretty little bow because, you know, it's almost like he was saying, you deserve more than that. You don't need a beautiful, tied together ending in order for this to mean something. And my personal opinion is that James Dashner really accomplishes this very well. And it brings meaning into The Scorch Trials. The Scorch Trials, like I said, is a much better book once you've read Death Cure, because they complement each other. In fact, my theory, personally, is that James Dashner could have definitely taken a more episodic approach to it. Just look at the Hunger Games. You know, by the end of the Hunger Games, you get a little more answers in Catching Fire, piled with more questions, and then you get a few more answers at the end, but then there's one big cliffhanger mystery, and then all the answers come to you in Mockingjay. There's a few more questions and more answers. It's all very formulaic. It's how young adult fiction series is especially work. That episodic formula works really well for that audience of people because it's predictable, but you can kind of throw your own twists and turns into it so that the audience thinks that it's not predictable. It's a whole psychological thing. I have a lot of theories about it, but it doesn't matter. I think that James Dashner took a look at that formula of questions, answers, questions, answers, questions, answers, cliffhanger, questions, answers, questions, answers, questions, answers, cliffhanger, and said, no, I'm not going to do that. So it was a bold move by Dashner, in my opinion. If I was his editor, I'd have been like, why? So the bold move was that Dashner put out a novel that is completely complementary to the third and final novel of the series. Why is this important? Well, it depends on your overall opinion of the Maze Runner trilogy. In my opinion, it's important because it changes the entire dynamic of the series. It changes Dashner's main goal, and it changes in a big, humongous way the Death Cure, the final book of the entire series, and what a massive finale it posed for the entire series. Not to mention the intentions of the best characters ever. So what does this have to do with the Scorch Trial movie? Well, alright. I really didn't like it, and I feel awful saying it. It's not that, okay, now let me actually take it real back a second. I liked it as a movie. It was kind of fun and entertaining, and yeah, I love Dylan O'Brien and the other actors and actresses. The actors and actresses did a phenomenal job, and I don't think really any of the fault or blame lies on them. I think they were wonderful. I liked it okay as a film, as much as I would like pretty much any run-of-the-mill apocalyptic action film. But as an adaptation, it was lacking, like, severely. So I learned after I watched the movie, because I was a little bit confused. I was like, okay, I feel like some of this did happen, but a lot of it didn't, but it's familiar, I'm confused. So I found out later that we have combined some of Death Cure and some of Scorch Trials, and I think what they were trying to do with this was they read Scorch Trials and they said, no, this isn't going to work for a movie because the audience would be just bored and confused and blah, blah, blah. And so I understand the logic. I do, but considering how massively important Scorch Trials is to Death Cure, I think this was a failure. Because like I said, it changes the dynamic of the entire series. I understand the logic of wanting to make the Scorch Trials a lot easier to swallow and a lot more entertaining and piece by piece formula, good guy, clear bad guy, clear conflict. I understand, but in doing so, I feel like we've kind of muddied one of the coolest parts of this entire series, not to mention we've pretty much buried Death Cure into the ground at this point. I'm not entirely sure how Death Cure is even going to happen, unless they're going to change everything again. Oh, wow. Oh, gosh, I feel like I'm speaking nonsense, and maybe you're just sitting there shaking your head at me like, what are you talking about? But maybe I can break it down into little pieces, just things I didn't like. Alright, one of the most massive points of this series is Teresa's character, who is my absolute favorite. I was just as frustrated with her as the rest of you guys were, for sure, in the Scorch trial. I didn't understand what was going on, but by the end of Death Cure, you realize she's a freaking hero and amazing, and she just sacrificed so much to help her friends, and it's amazing. Whereas in this film version, Teresa's just kind of that person in every movie who thinks she's doing the right thing, but actually knows she isn't, and everything is bad, and you hate her, and she cries, and I mean, I guess you could still have that twist ending, but the effect, the absolute avalanche-like effect of just, oh my gosh, Teresa was good. She was doing so much good for all of them all along. Wow. Oh my gosh, like that moment, that being pummeled by a pile of bricks moment is gone now. It's gone. Yeah, I'm sorry. The effect is going to be diminished quite a bit. It just will. So the cranks, or I mean the clickers, because these are literally the clickers from The Last of Us. Did anybody else? No. I mean, they're literally clickers. So they turned the cranks into just like zombie people. It was fun. It was entertaining. You jump when they come out of nowhere and whatever. But dang it! The cranks in the book were cool. They were cool. They didn't need to be changed. I thought the cranks in the series were so freaking scary because they weren't so zombie-ish as they were just crazy. Like, parts of them were falling off, but they could still talk, and they were creepy. Like, one of my favorite parts of the entire series, which actually happened to be in Scorch Trials, which is funny because it's my least favorite book, was when Thomas was hiding in the gutters, and the one crazy guy, the Rose got my nose, I suppose. Rose got my nose, I suppose. Get it? And he's falling apart. Oh, it was so creepy, and it was one of the best parts about the series. And okay, oh man, I have so much to say, you guys. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this series is really cool because it's dystopian mixed with sci-fi, mixed with just a smidge of whimsy. Like, have you read other sci-fi and everything's very, I don't know, it's like they won't take the lengths to be somewhat whimsical about the things they do, but the Maze Runner's got that monster-y feel. Like, we've got monsters, we've got the cranks, we've got this really interesting, crazy technology. Even the flare itself is just a really interesting disease, and just it's almost whimsical. Like, that's how I would best describe it. It's just a really interesting mix that you don't see that often in sci-fi, or at least I don't think so. I mean, from the sci-fi I've read. So that was a problem. Everything was a problem. Dang it. I'm so angry because the Maze Runner, the first movie, I really liked. I thought it was really good. I thought the changes made weren't that big of a deal and that it would carry over really well. And then something happened and everything just tumbled downhill so quickly. Oh god. I'm all for making Brenda a much better character. I didn't like Brenda in the series, the book series. I understand what Dashner was trying to do, but I thought she was kind of pointless, and honestly, you could have rewritten the series without Brenda and everything would have happened basically the same. I mean, you'd have to tweak a couple things, but I don't know. I just didn't, it's not that I didn't like Brenda personally as like a character, she was cool or whatever, she just kind of was there. So I'm all for her having a point, but they took it a lot a bit far, too far, way too far. You weren't even supposed to know about the right arm yet, I don't think. The very beginning of the Scorch Trial book was so cool. Remember when they had the brands on the back of their neck? And it was like the leader, and then like, the Minhos said the leader, and Thomas said to be killed by Group B. And it was such a shock that that was huge. That there were other kids coming from other mazes. That was crazy. I remember reading and being like, no way! What? And Eris and Teresa, like, you have to admit, even though the Scorch Trials felt very long and very boring, there were elements of surprise that just just were amazing. Just so well done. Such actual legitimate holding your breaths, are you kidding me twists that have just been kind of stomped into the ground now, and Eris was like pointless in this, and like, why was he even there? Probably, okay. I guess I can wrap this up. So there was a lot of things I didn't like. Mostly just, I understand what they were getting to with the mixing the two novels because they really wanted to make it more entertaining for a film audience, but by doing that, they've ruined the Death Cure effectively. And you should have just done it. Like, I think they should have just read the book and been like, this is gonna be really hard, but you know what? This is really important for the Death Cure to really be amazing, and I think we should just throw more action in there, but keep everything going the way that it does. I mean, look at Catching Fire! Catching Fire was my least favorite book in the entire Hunger Games series. I thought it was so boring. I mean, it was good, but it took so freaking long for anything to start happening. And yet, probably my favorite movie in the series. All they added was a dose of action. They made things go a little bit quicker. That's all you really needed to do. You didn't need to put these parts that don't belong together and introduce characters that don't make sense and make people pointless and make other people pointless in other ways, and like you made everything very messy and you didn't need to do it. I'm just saying, I understand, but there were better ways to go about this, I'm pretty sure. Maybe you disagree with me, I don't know. That's possible, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy. I've been told. Okay, so I've been saving my number one complaint for last because it infuriates me to no end. I don't know if you guys watched my Scorch Trials trailer reaction. I don't know. I think I got into this, and I think I talked about it when I've talked about the Maze Runner in the past too. One of the greatest things about this series, and actually arguably the best thing about this series, especially amongst other young adult series, is there is no clear good, bad, right, or wrong. Why? Why do they repeat over and over, Wicked is good, Wicked is bad, Wicked is good, Wicked is bad? Because Wicked isn't a center for morale. It's not a person. Wicked is a company. Wicked is the thing that came together when the flare started happening and everybody pooled their resources together because it was one final desperate attempt to find a cure. Wicked is just a group. Wicked is neither good nor bad. However, there are people in Wicked who are good, who are bad, and who are morally ambiguous. Just like there are people in the maze, see where I'm going with this, who were good, who were bad, who were, morally ambiguous. You could make the argument that Thomas is a nuisance, is a bad person. You could make the argument, I think you could, that Wicked is mostly good. You could make this argument. You could go back and forth forever. It is one of the most interesting things about this series. There is no clear good or bad. There is just a group of kids who are confused and are trying their best to survive, and a group of scientists who have taken these resources, are not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, are not finding a cure but are so close, and are trying to figure out what they do with the information that they have. Who do they sacrifice? Do they sacrifice people? Is it for the greater good? Does it all matter? Does any of it matter in the end? It is so much bigger than just, this group of kids is such a good group of kids, go them, and Wicked is bad, evil scientists. It doesn't work that way, even with the right arm. Even with Jorge, even with Brenda. That ambiguity is so refreshing in a young adult novel. Because it's not trying so hard to have all these gray characters. That's not the point. The point I think that Dashner was trying to make is that the survival of you versus the survival of all of humanity would create conflict. And these books are all about conflict. They're about survival. They're about how far would you go to survive, and would you sacrifice yourself for the survival of others? Awesome. I don't know if I'm reading too far into it, but that's why I love The Maze Runner. And when you have Wicked storming around, hurting kids. Don't worry, we're shooting down all these people. We got you. Yeah, we're just doing this. Like, it's just, like, they were kind of going the right direction with Ava a little bit. Oh, please make sure they feel no pain. You can tell that there's a part of her that just really wants to get all of this over with, because she's probably not a horrible, terrible human being so much as now she feels like she's too far in and she needs to do whatever she can to get the cure. I thought that was very well done, and I like the actress they chose for Ava. However, it's just, did anybody of you get that vibe? Like, at the end of it, it was just like, Wicked doesn't just storm in and kill people like, ah ha ha ha, good, more dead people. Like, it was never the point. That was never the point. And I'm frustrated. It was good as a singular movie, like away from the books, but once you start taking them into consideration, and not just Scorch Trials, all of them, because you really, really do need to consider every single book in the series when you're talking about it. They're very non-episodic. You need one to complement the other, and that's kind of the big bold move that Dashner made. Whether or not you think it worked in the end is a matter of opinion, but the fact remains that is a thing that happened in the structure of things. It's all very together. They need each other to complement each other. But yeah, anyway. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I'm just so frustrated and sad. I'm sad because now that this has been ruined for me, I'll go see the Death Cure, honestly, because, I do want to support Dashner. And like I said, it's hard because I'm not actually mad at anybody in particular. I do understand what they were trying to do. I just think other methods would have been superior. So I'll probably go see Death Cure still and whatnot, but I just know that Death Cure is not going to be as good as it could have been. And since it was my favorite book in the series, and since Teresa's shining moments happened in the Death Cure, and now she's been kind of ruined, I'm mad. I'm mad, okay? Like the cranks. Rose got my nose, I suppose. Oh, gosh. But maybe I'm alone in this. Maybe you guys really liked the changes and you thought they were necessary. Talk to me about it. Talk to me below. I am more than happy to discuss this, or at least just, read your comments, get some insight. I am not the end-all when it comes to this kind of thing. I would be interested to know, though, if any people agree with me, like if you kind of felt that same way. Just because, it's just fun to discuss and try to figure out things. So, now that this is happening, how the heck are they going to clean up this mess and do the Death Cure? Because I don't even see how Death Cure is possible at this point. So maybe you can throw out some suggestions to me. Maybe you can console me. Maybe you can tell me, no, this was the best movie ever. Just let me know. Let's talk about this, and I'm going to try not to, scream. I'm going to try.